Is here. Hello, everybody. This is Michael Tabb, starting a touch late in our very first afternoon GoToTraining here on campus at Full Sail University. Welcome. I am here to answer any and all questions. This week in this GoToTraining class, I have students from character creation and development, as well as writing for film and animation, which is screenplay writing, not to be confused with episodic writing for television. I'm going to take off my tie, make myself at home with you guys. All right, we're better. I feel better already. How about you? All right, there we go. All right, so the first thing I want to do is open it up and find out if any of you have questions. Do any of you have questions about anything you're working on, or the class or the lessons? Because everything is always due in my classes that gets turned into me on Sunday. And I just want to make sure that at the end of every week, everybody has a chance to run things by me in a classroom kind of setting, which is what this is for. I hear nothing. So basically, everything explains itself. I am a genius in lesson design. And okay, so basically what everybody should be working on this week is premise. And also, by the way, you guys have all muted your own microphones except for Ms. Applewhite. So if you were trying to speak and I didn't hear you, it's because you turned your own microphones off. So we're going to be, it's premise, it's genre, it's brainstorming, the visual images that represent specifically the genre, not necessarily the idea. And then we have in the other class, people have gone through this entire class, so we're going much further, and we'll be we're reviewing things from this class, but doing it for the film or story ideas you have in writing for film and animation. And that will include protagonist's inner and outer journey, the antagonist's goal, the love interest, and what actions he or she takes to inspire the protagonist to make their character arc, i.e. the inner journey, the mentor, and the protagonist reflection character that I also refer to as the ally. And then they come up with a log line also for their movie to pigeonhole that into place. So those are the basic things that everybody here, if you have questions, those are the things we'd want to focus on. Now I have a note here from one of my fabulous students. Here we go. In the genre visualization assignment, each image on the brainstorm list of visuals must be specific to the genre you selected. It may have nothing to do with your story that you write. How does that become an item list? Okay, so basically the idea is we are writing for film, television, comic books in this program, video games, and in doing so, what you're doing is you're moving from, those of you who have written in the past, you're moving from writing to be a writing that is absorbed through reading it to material that is going to be absorbed by an audience through watching it. You're switching from an audio medium to a visual medium. That means all the drama and all the things you have going on with your characters are best done through physical action and representation. You know, when somebody's extremely furious in a book, they could talk about the feeling and the sickness in their stomach and the fury in their head and how their face is beet red and the headache starting that won't stop. But none of that actually really would translate to a film except for getting red in the face. Because emotion and everything, you don't tell people how you feel, you have to show them how they feel. So we don't include scripts and movies, information that's going on in the head. We have to physicalize it so that the audience knows what's happening because they're watching the story. So when you do a brainstorm list for a genre, what you're doing is you're encapsulating the visuals and the ideas of the physical motions and the physical things you expect and want to see when you see a movie in that genre. When you go to see a mystery, You want suspense. You want to see people waiting. You want to see somebody, or you can imagine seeing, the things you imagine seeing is the phone rings and somebody jumps, or the door slowly creaking open. Could use that one probably for thriller as much as you could for horror. Some images may overlap, but the key is that the images have to feel completely and 100% grounded in the specific genre. In comedy, you may be writing slapstick, or you may be wanting something more serious. So depending, a guy tripping down a manhole would be funny for somebody doing slapstick. Body humor, fart jokes, things like that. But if you want something more elevated, then you got to think of situations that are more funny. You could be doing a crime comedy. So a guy who's just robbed a bank, has a bank full of cash with a $100 bill hanging out of it, walks into a room and it's filled with cops. And he's looking around and they don't know what he just did, but he's standing there in his all black outfit carrying a bag with $100 sticking out of the piping. That is going to make people laugh. That's crime comedy. So you have to figure out how you're going to conceptualize the visual of the genre that you're going to pick. And in this class, I only ask you to come up with 40 per genre per time you mention it. So if you because you turn in 3 ideas, 3 premise this week. And when you turn in 3, everyone has to have at least 1 genre. And for each time you name a genre, you have to have 40 images. But if you say you picked fantasy, then you would have, but you used fantasy for all 3 of them, all 3 ideas, all 3 genres, because fantasy is what you love to write, and you want to approach stories in the world of fantasy because you feel, for whatever reason, sometimes it's easier to digest and enjoy a fantasy because it doesn't feel so in your face about the right now. Other people want what they have to say in your face. So it's a total of 120 minimum. But if you pick 2 genres for 1 script, for 1 premise, then that would mean that you need to do 80 just for that one. And so it's anywhere between 120 and 240 images that are specific only to the genre. At this point, I want to be clear, none of you should be working on a story. We don't have a story yet. Here's how this works. In week 1, we come up with a premise, which is going to be the basis of everything. Everything is going to be built upon what it is you want to say to the world. This is possibly the hardest thing you learn in this entire program. It was the hardest thing for me. But
I lost downstairs.
I'm sorry, you had a question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my mic activated. I was talking to my son.
Oh, okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
So as we're doing this, is it just to kind of come up with different representations of that genre and premise? Or should we have a story in mind kind of like that fits that, or just whatever goes with that?
Look, you may develop story ideas and that may feed into your visual premise because you may think, oh, I'm thinking fantasy. Ooh, I want to have a guy fighting a dragon because the dragon is going to represent this. And I'm going to have the dragon talk so it can really represent it and really enforce it. So then you may start finding story in your images. But this is about, story building and world building is an incredibly complex process to do correctly because everything has to layer on top of everything and it has to all fit like you have this and then this fits in this wedge so that everything fits together and it really comes together as a cohesive thing. But for me to really show all the students how you build everything into everything, we have to start from nothing. So I'm going to teach you how you go from nothing into an idea. Okay, and build characters from nothing and then build story from the characters. So that's how things, because you're designing everything to fit perfectly, okay? Now, then after this class, what you may choose to do is once you've been through the process of seeing how to build out an idea, you may have an idea you wanted to write or ideas that you're coming up with, and then try to reverse engineer from having come up with the story all the way back to to a premise and figuring out what it is that story is saying and what those characters are trying to do and how they fit together to tell that story. Because sometimes you look, when you start out writing, people mostly start writing because they have a great idea for a story. It's like they see the end product and that excites them so much they want to go write about it. And that's what excites us about writing. But eventually what happens is you keep writing, you keep having ideas, but don't forget, at some point you can be like, I don't know what I want to write yet. I haven't figured it out. You always need to be able to go back, and you can't stop writing because you don't have a finished idea of a product in your head. Otherwise, you have no career. And then there's so much pressure on you from having to think up an idea that you all of a sudden feel totally lost about how to accomplish it. And that's how writer's block is created, that tension between knowing you need to be doing something and not knowing what to do or how to do it. This process that I'm teaching you in this class will make sure you never have writer's block again, because you start from absolutely nothing. And if you can figure out, and you do figure out how to create a premise, which is a really strongly stated, very unique, not a cliche, a unique opinion about the world and how to fix a problem in it, or an observation of it that people don't realize, if you can figure out things like that, you not only have found your voice as an artist, but you always have something to go back to from which to base and build a story. You can go back and use the same premise over and over again, putting it in different genres, because in a different genre, you would be making that statement in a different way. But then you're still saying what it is that you uniquely say, and not some cliche that a million other movies and storytellers have been asked to do over the last 100 years of cinematic story making. So we start with a premise, which is a very, very, very strong opinion, something you should feel extremely passionate about. If you don't have a passionate opinion about something in the world, how messed up it is and why it's messed up and what people need to do in order to fix it for the rest of us, for themselves, for the people they love, then you haven't figured out why you're writing yet. And that's why this week is so hard. That's why premise, it seems like a short week. You come up with 3 basic opinions, pick 3 genres, and you come up with some images that fit genre. You want comedy, you come up with funny images. You come with romance, I see hearts floating in the air around somebody's head. It can be pretty. You can start realizing it's not so hard. But coming up with a premise and really thinking about what it is you have to say to the world, what it is you would spend your last breath on if you could say it to a million people, which is what you hope your movies will do, if not millions. That's what we're here to do. That's what writing is about. Writing is about helping the world, changing the world, or shining a light on the world that they don't realize is there. That's why art is holding the mirror up to nature and show nature its own form. This is from Shakespeare. Anyway, so the premise is really important. It is not a story. It should not have specific characters or very specific situations in it at all. It's, one of my more recent premise I've been working with is a mother's love does have its limits, because at some point a mother will have to cut off their child if they don't stop messing things up. They're getting people hurt, and it's going to sink the rest of the family. There will come a point, but that's the antithesis and the opposite statement of what everybody thinks is the cliche. Your mother, your mom. You know what I mean? So it's about figuring out something unique to say and explaining why and what happens, and that this is why this happens, and this is a light you have to shine that people don't realize is an actual reality, is that somebody can ruin their relationship with their own parents and never come back from it. And it would devastate a normal person. Now, some people have parents they wouldn't mind that with, because they already feel that way, and that's fine. No, it's not fine. It's tragic, but you get the idea. So that's why that's so important. And then, does anybody have questions on that before I continue rambling? Is this helping? All you guys have muted your microphones, so yes, okay. It's my favorite brand. I love cliche. My favorite brand of bubble gum. Very nice,
Yeah.
Mr. Lopez. I love it.
I'm like face palming myself so hard because I thought it was 120 per premise, and I got stuck on that, and I'm like, I'm just gonna turn it in without them because I really didn't understand the
Don't do that.
picture, and it's 120. So my Word document has between every premise 120 numbers, so I can later fill them out for the Sunday thing, and I'm like, what did I do? Why was I stressing out about it? Oh my God. I feel so stupid right now.
Well, don't feel stupid. Look, the
Oh my
hardest
God.
thing, the hardest thing about an online class is that, there's this distance between you and me. And you can't just raise your hand and say, hey, by the way, what's that about? You know what I mean?
I
So,
was so lost.
well, when something like that happens, email me. Uh, I hope that the assignment is pretty clear at the bottom. It says it's not pictures. It's come up with images that encapsulate a genre. And I gave a list of over 100 examples in the article, and then in the assignment I included 5 really detailed examples that you might use for an advanced list for a Western. So you can see what it is I would do, and there are examples of it in the assignment. So I hope those help. Um, you know, yeah, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it was confusing, though. Of course, but I'm here. That's what I'm here for. I'm here to answer questions. Does anybody have questions on any of those things I just talked about before I move forward? Any other things?
I have I have something. I think you may have been touching on it before, actually, when I joined the call. But just in case, one of my premises was set for the adventure category,
Mm-hmm.
and I think I paused at some point and started making a portion of those into fantasy when before they were kind of modern. I was thinking like at first I was kind of picturing something like Walter Mitty, and then I was like, well, adventure could also be Lord of the Rings and stuff like that. So is that
fantasy?
That okay? Well, one of the articles, the reason why sorry, my boys are making noise, but the reason why I started going for fantasy type stuff is because Lord of the Rings was listed in one of the articles as an adventure. One of the
it's an adventure fantasy because
okay.
an adventure by idea is something that really moves through multiple spaces. It'd be like country hopping. Adventure is going to strange new worlds and places for you. If I had to go through the Middle East, go to India, and then the Great Wall of China to find a relic that will get me a treasure or a piece of history, that would be an adventure. So it is a 2-category film that is an adventure and it's a fantasy. It is technically both because they are going over this large trek and it continues for all 3 films.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. Was there any other question in that? Did I miss something, or is that good?
No, I guess I just kind of wanted clarification to see if I did something wrong, but what you said makes sense. So
yeah, it's not bad. It's not bad. And if you have fantastic, I love every genre. There are amazing, brilliant movies in every single genre. So I always I look forward to them all, but you can't not love Lord of the Rings. It's funny. The first time I saw it in the movie theater, I didn't. And then I had to watch it again and then again before it really sunk into me that I really liked it. Now I'm a huge fan. It's funny. Some movies do that to you.
Yeah. Actually, I do have one more question.
Yeah.
Kind of along those lines. So if let's say a war movie, if I made that into a medieval war movie, is that a multi-genre thing too, or does that stay within the category of
Well,
just
is
war?
it historical or is it historical fiction? Are you just setting something in medieval times based on real events, or is it based on just a generic medieval times? And yeah.
For the sake of this question, I'd say just generic medieval times, but no magic, no dragons, but not modern.
Okay, so that would be historical. But
Okay.
it's not historical because it's not true. It's not a historical or biopic. It's just a period piece. So no, that wouldn't be the genre. The genre is the genre adventure, or what did you have in mind?
One of my other ones was set in the war category, and I kept it all fairly modern with guns and everything, but I was just wondering if I could have, put swords and arrows and all that jazz.
Yeah, if you put swords and arrows in a war film that is set in the era of that, then yes. And if you set it in like World War II, you're heading into a different category, more fantastic in nature, because people.
Okay.
If you're going outside the bounds of reality as we understand it, then you're heading either into fantasy or science fiction, or well, no, horror is really about a feeling that it gives you. Yeah.
Okay. Gracias.
De nada. Mr. Lopez, you say your life is a comedy. You swear it. You know what? Good. Have a sense of humor about it, because you know what? Life takes no prisoners. So you might as well laugh at it. If you can laugh at it, you're good.
I just got a call from Papa John's asking me why I didn't order pizza today.
Why?
And I'm like,
why did you not order pizza today?
I'm like, what? He's like, well, you've been ordering pizza for the past few weeks every Friday. I was like thinking to myself, you know what? Maybe I should stop eating pizza now.
That's hysterical. I can't imagine somebody calling me and saying, "Where is you come for this thing at this time?" It's like, wow, and they called you. They found your number.
Yeah, it's like, no, like they have my number because of because I order online, right?
Yeah.
The thing is, like, my phone has like recognition, so it literally says Papa John's pizza on the phone. I'm like, I didn't order pizza today. The answer is like,
you know what?
Yeah, you didn't order pizza today.
Script. People would not believe you and think it's not real.
Oh my God! Right?
You'd have to be. It would have to be a movie from the pizza parlor's owner, and it's about how he needs to save the parlor to save his life, or pay for his daughter to go to college, and the parlor's going under, and he's you'd have to really, really, really examine why this guy would be that. That's insane. That's funny. Okay, not that it's funny to you. You said it was funny, so I can say it's funny. All right. Does anybody else have any questions?
I find that hysterical. It's like, Yep, this is something that would happen to me.
And only you. I've never heard of that. Okay. Okay. So everybody understands that the premise is an opinion, strongly held. You understand that the genre is to go with that opinion. It's a way of picturing that opinion in the world you're going to put it in. And then the images have to do with the genre, not necessarily the premise. Not that it can't contain both, but every image does need to pertain just to the genre, specifically to the genre. So if you say, if the movie is a crime movie and you put the word bedroom on your list, no, that doesn't work. Bedroom has nothing to do with a crime movie. Yes, scenes can take place in a bedroom, but you need to give us more information. Somebody sneaking around in a bedroom while somebody is sleeping and pulling the money out of their sock drawer, now it's a crime movie thing, because you put crime into the image. But if crime isn't there, you can't use it as a crime image for the brainstorm. Okay, yeah, I hear that all the time, that I sound like Seth Rogen. That's funny. By the way, for any of you watching or listening to this later, I see a chat window here, so I'm responding to things in the chat window, but you don't see that for some reason. It doesn't work that way on the recording. So just so you know, I'm not just changing subject out of absolutely nowhere because I have multiple personality disorder, or DID. That's not it. Though maybe I do, who knows. Hello. All right, so now that we talked about premise and those things, I'm going to move ahead a little bit because I have a moment and talk just a little bit about what they're doing in writing for film and animation, because it also contains what everybody else is doing in character creation and development. You are going to be going through these steps in the future. So you might as well start to hear the ideas now. First thing is that you decide on a protagonist, and you fix on a protagonist by figuring out what their inner journey is and what their outer journey is. So, and you start with the inner journey, because the inner journey is a direct reflection of your premise. Your premise will say something like, a mother's love has its limits, okay? Which means if my protagonist is the mother is going to have her limits. So her character arc is probably going to be going from something like a martyr to a taker. She's somebody who gives and gives and gives, a giver to a taker. And that shows a complete character arc in personality change. And you'll notice that the both sides of that character arc, giver and taker, you cannot be both at the same time. You can't pick two sides of an arc that could actually coexist in the same human being in any way. They have to be that opposite. Your journey has to be that clear. And it has to that clearly relate to the premise, because the character arc is what's going to prove your premise. Because she's going to finally learn that she has to stop giving and start taking, that's going to prove that a mother's love was going to have its limits. You can't prove it without doing that. So it's interrelated, and this is how you build story. You build story by making a point and then proving it with a character that you follow who changes because they realize the point you're trying to make. And by doing that, you're showing the audience how your point is proven. Because if it changes this person, maybe it changes their opinion or gives them the realization that your character had. Then you come up with an outer journey. What's the outer journey? What is this person trying to accomplish that would put them in a situation to discover that? So, for example, an outer journey might be to get their child to go to college. And this person may fail, or they may succeed, but they may realize they're such a screw up. They have a gambling debt. They have loan sharks after them. And then the mother has to go in debt to save the kid, but the kid keeps going further and further in debt. So the idea is, you put the mother in a situation where because if it's about a mother's love, generally speaking, or the love of mother, a mother's love of some kind, then the character that is going to be, we have to test and push that with a relationship of somebody she's the mother to. So you have a job, and now that you know who it's going to relate to and what she's going to have to do, and that gives you a physical outer journey. So she's trying to get this person to get into college and go to college, and that's her goal. Then that brings us to an antagonist, because once you have an outer journey for the protagonist, something that they're trying to accomplish, which is going to put them in a situation to prove your premise, you then create an antagonist, someone with an opposing opinion, who obviously is going to think that a mother's love has no end and that he can always come back to her. And you're going to design an antagonist to try to prove the opposite point. And it's the point that a lot of people will believe in usually. And it has to be a strong antagonist. This character is, therefore, the antagonist, the kid. The reason why the mother would have such hopes for this kid is probably because he's smart, he's charming, people like him. And you can be all those things and be a screw up. Believe me, it can happen. And so you're designing an antagonist with a goal to do something. And maybe the antagonist goal is to be the founder of a get-rich-quick scheme, which will occupy all his time and wouldn't allow him to go to college. Something like that. He has a goal that would keep him out of college. So if either one succeeds, the other one has to fail. That's what's really important between an antagonist goal and a protagonist outer journey. If one succeeds, the other cannot. They should not necessarily depend. It's really important, and it's a tough thing to do, but you have to create two proactive characters after something very specific. With a visual ending, with a visual clarity, and they have to conflict with each other, but they don't necessarily have to include each other. It's just by circumstance. They don't have to include each other. It just has to be via the situation. Somebody can want to blow up New York to make a point, a terroristic point about Western colonization, and another person's job can be to whatever the law person's job, whatever you realize that goal is. It could be to his goal could simply one guy's goal could simply be to get his kid home from school today, but he's not going to be able to do that if he doesn't stop this terrorist threat. So he can be doing one thing, and the other character can be doing another thing, and they don't even have anything to do with each other except whatever they're trying to accomplish gets in the way of what they're trying to. What the other person is trying to accomplish is getting away in the way of what the other one is trying to accomplish, and so they have to confront each other. And that's the best way to design it. So you have characters who are independently working to do their own thing, and it's not when a character is overly dependent. Their job is to stop someone else. Then they seem unorganic in a movie because of the fact that so this character's whole life revolves around doing something that has to do with this character. Nobody lives like that. We do things for ourselves. Characters must be motivated for their own lives. So once you come up with an antagonist and you have the protagonist journey, then you get to start to work on the supporting characters. You have a love interest, a mentor, who is a type of reflection character, and the general protagonist reflection character. The love interest is the one who helps the protagonist achieve their inner journey. Think of it, love interest, inner journey, because it's in your heart, it's your emotions. You have to have somebody in the film who's putting the protagonist in situations that are emotionally making them realize that what their inner personality flaw is, the first half of their character arc, that they're doing things wrong. So you have a character whose responsibility is to show the audience and the protagonist why what they're doing doesn't work and why they have to change internally and what they need to do. It can be a typical romantic character, or it can be a son, a daughter, a father. It doesn't have to be romantic, though most people use romantic, and most people even say it's a romantic character. But for me, it's a love interest. It has to do with the love, and it doesn't have to necessarily always be romantic. And then you have the mentor, who is the one who is helping the protagonist learn and physically teach them how to do what they need to learn how to do in order to get them to accomplish their goal. So let's say the mother is trying to get her son to go to college, but first she has to get him out of debt. My idea for a mentor in that story, in that crime story, is that actually the mentor becomes the crime boss the son owes money to. And the mentor teaches her how to run a business and to do things that sometimes you have to draw a line. And actually, the person you really think is the antagonist is really the mentor. And the person who you think is, more of a character that they love actually evolves into realizing that's actually the antagonist. It's the person keeping them from being who they need to be. So characters can go through this arc of who they are and who they need to be. And the key is that you have to understand where they're going to end up in the story. But so yes.
That reminds me of the movie Baby Driver. It has, you think somebody's the bad guy, but then it's like, okay, this is the actual antagonist.
Yeah, it's like that's the best thing. I love those twists. Or when you think somebody is, one of my favorite crime movies is, it's a little long, but it's still a great, slow, steady, intense burn, is L.A. Confidential. And, one of the allies you find out is the person actually behind everything. So it's a really wonderful, holy crud halfway through the film when you find out. You find out in a very cinematic, visually stunning way. It's great. That's how it's done best. And then the reflection character, all other reflection characters, you really have one, maybe two mentors at most. If what you're talking about is a philosophy and you want to talk about whether it's how you act or how you feel, how mind or mission, what's more important in life, then you may have two 2 mentors, but usually it's just one. And then the other reflection characters are the ones who support and are there for your character, are examples for your character, and for what to do, what not to do. They're sounding boards. They're more like the people. The mentor is the higher ranking character, your military commander in a situation, in the middle of a fight, and the other reflection characters, the average reflection characters, they're the people in the trenches with you of your rank or lower. So, like, for example, there's a bunch of privates, which is the lowest rank in the army, and then maybe the protagonist is a corporal or something like that, which puts him literally just one rank above a private. But then the sergeant or the major or the lieutenant is the one giving orders. So the lieutenant would be the mentor. Your protagonist could be a corporal, and then the other characters in the trenches with them could be other privates or corporals. I don't know if that makes sense, but we get a lot of military students, so I thought that might help as an example. And that's designing characters. Does anybody have any questions on any of that? Because that's the majority of what everybody's going to be working on.
I had one. I don't know that it'll be possible to answer on this spot, but I'm always frustrated, typically with TV shows, because I think the writers just kind of run out of ideas.
Yes.
As the episodes go on, but
that's why they swap out writers. That's why writers get fired off of shows and bring new ones in each season.
Right.
But
so my question is, it seems like very often characters do things that are totally, it's just too much of a jump. It's like that character wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? I don't know what that would be called, but are there any...
The shark. And there's a reference to an old television show. I don't know if any of you remember the TV show Happy Days. The Happy Days was actually made in the 70s, and it was at about the 50s. And it's called... That's funny. I came up with the phrase "nuking the fridge." The nuking the fridge is the most recent Indiana Jones, when Indiana Jones climbs in a refrigerator to survive a nuclear blast, and he gets thrown like 1,000 feet, and then he climbs out of it just fine, brushes himself off. That's when you know the movie's in trouble. In Happy Days, it was a TV show where it takes place in this little town. A lot of stuff was at this little diner, this little hamburger joint, and where people would hang out. And there was this cool cat who all the girls loved, and he talked, "Hey," and that was his thing. And he'd give thumbs up, and he was like Mr. Cool for the 70s. For the 70s, it was very cool, him in his leather jacket. And then a couple years into the show, they did this special episode where he, on his motorcycle, decided to do a stunt, and he was going to jump a shark tank on his motorcycle out of nowhere. It's like, what? This guy doesn't have to prove anything to anybody. He's Arthur Fonzarelli, the Fonz. And all of a sudden, it made no sense. And it was the moment in which that show started to decline rapidly and go downhill and look like, okay, nobody knows the show anymore. So there is a point, and they call it, in TV, they call it jumping the shark. In film, I call it nuking the fridge. That you do something in a script that's just like, okay, they've lost all sense of touch with the story. So yeah, that can happen, and it does happen. So do you have a question about it, or do you just want confirmation that that's a real thing?
I did have kind of a question. Are there any typical points in time where that happens? Any classic mistakes people make, or anything we can do to avoid that happening, to recognize when it's happening?
2 things: being true to the reality that you created for the show or the film, and being true to the characters that you created. If you are true to the reality and the characters, you're not going to lose us on something like that, because it has to be believable. It's like there are things that happen in real life, like, say, pizza people calling you because you didn't order a pizza on Friday. That you put that in a script, and people are going to be like, I don't know if I buy that as a reality. So it can happen in the real world, but you wouldn't put that in a script because people wouldn't buy it. There are people who will ride a motorcycle and jump it over a shark tank. It just didn't make sense for Arthur Fonzarelli to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about making sure that when I finish a script, I just finished a screenwriting job, a WGA job for a producer, and I just finished that draft. The first thing I do is I go through it and I'll edit out everything I think I don't need. And then the next draft I do is a series of drafts, and I go through a draft for each character, and I focus on one main character each time, and I read the whole script, just making sure that that character's voice and actions are consistent and fitting with the character I created. And if it seems generic what he's doing, I ask myself, okay, how can I get this more grounded in his more individual personality to make it more him, more realistic, more clear, and more defined? Creating great characters on the page that actors love to play is about creating characters of a completely unique nature. Now, that doesn't mean everybody, like, this guy has an eye patch and that one has, it's not about silly cliche things. It's about just making sure you understand their personalities, their flaws, mostly their flaws, because the flaws also tell you what their skills are. Because if somebody is insecure, they're insecure, they don't speak up, and they're quiet, they're also really good at laying low when there's blame. They're good at ducking under and not being noticed in scenes and things when things are happening. So when you're thinking about what a character is good at, you can use, or you're thinking about trying to figure out what a character's flaw is. If you know what somebody is good at, or you know what their flaw is, you can figure out what the other one is by process of elimination. So if this person has to be good at this thing to make your story work, that's going to tell you if they're good at this, that means they're not good at something. Because if somebody is really good at salesmanship, somebody, and they're all about getting the sale, maybe they have a moral problem or an inability to let things go, or to let people say no to them, or you think about, okay, what are the things that would, if somebody is really super brainy, like there's a lot of movies like Real Genius I love. It is one of these great college comedies I love. It's about super intelligent college students, and there's so much about solving the equation that they don't think about the moral ramifications of what happens if they do it, and that comes back to bite them in the end, and they realize they've created something that can be used to do horrible things, and they have to stop it. And they do it in a comedy. If you haven't seen Real Genius, it's one of those silly college comedies, but it's really wonderful. But it all plays into understanding your character and understanding the world and the reality you've created, and keeping true to that, and understand people tune in for something that you have already created. If you keep doing something and that's what they like and that's why they keep coming back, turning it into a stunt show, jumping sharks, when what we're about is the characters and the relationships, and how this guy, the Fonz, is a mentor to these kids and teaches them to be confident and take care of themselves, and maybe get women, but be respectful, because the Fonz was always about treating women with respect. As much as he was, hey, snap his fingers and women come flocking, he wanted that power, but when he did it, he treated women well. It wouldn't fly in today's audience because there is a slightly misogynistic element to that kind of behavior. But at the same time, he would always turn around and say, hey, you don't treat a lady like that. You know what I mean? So he was kind of like the love doctor of these kids who were geeks, and he's kind of and nerdish and don't really understand girls. And he was kind of this guy who would help them through that. That's what the show was about. That's what we cared about the Fonz, because he was cool, and we cared about these kids because they were still babes in the woods. And we understand that, and we want to know how they're going to grow up and mature and figure these things out. And they were interesting enough that we cared. And their nuclear family was nice, and they had all these relations. It was anyway. So it was a good show for its time, a very good show for its time. And but then they broke it. They literally broke it when they started having characters do giant stunts. And it was a two-parter. Like, he's about to go over the thing, and he could die and everything, and then it's to be continued. And you're like, you're going to kill the Fonz on Happy Days. No. It just was ridiculous. Anyway, I've talked way too much about Happy Days on the show, which probably really dates when I was a child. Dates me. Does anybody else have any questions before we finish today's session? You can feel free to unmute your microphones if anybody has anything to say. And if not, I hope you feel this was very helpful. It was an absolute pleasure to be able to do this for you. I look forward to everybody's submission on Friday. And thank you for showing up and waiting for me to show up. Again, graduation ran over, and I couldn't walk away without shaking the hands of the people who came to graduation. That's my job, and I always let them know that, and I'll let you know this when you've had your last class with me, that whether you're in my class or not, you can always email me and ask me questions about things, because we all need allies and mentors and friends and people in the industry, and you're never alone. You have a class full of people right now. Make friends. It's one of the most important things you do. It's not only learning your craft, but making allies in a business that is very hard to get ahead in. And it's nice to have friends who will give you feedback and know the kind of things that you know, so that they understand and can speak in ways you understand through lessons that you have learned in school to help catch things before you submit them to people outside your circle of trust. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to your work.